Hey, what's going on? Coach Luka here from Vigor Fitness and Performance. I'm in my ninja, well, it's not completely all black, all black attire. But I wanted to cover today the deadlift in quite a bit of detail. And the reason why is because we get this a lot, mostly from, I would say from people that contact me and ask me about the deadlift. What should they use? They're having issues with it. There's pain. There's this, that, and the other. So I just wanted to kind of do a tutorial, a teaching on, how we progress and regress the deadlift, and when to use it, what to use. We're just kind of going to go into coaching cues, because a lot of that, we've had a ton of people say, well, deadlift bugs me, and then we just coach them and cue them on the form, and it cleared it up right away. Sometimes we use, we'll change the kind of, whether it's from the regular deadlift to the trap bar to the sumo to rack pulls, the kettlebell deadlift, whatever it may be, because pretty much almost anybody can deadlift. Now, the first prerequisite is, I'll say, is to have the mobility and stability to be able to deadlift. So what that means is, if you have insanely, tight hamstrings and you can't touch your toes, right, to go to the ground and pull the bar off the floor is not a good idea. It's definitely not a good idea to do a regular deadlift because you don't have the mobility, right? If I'm here and the only way for me to get down to the ground is to round, right, and I'm going to try to deadlift, it means that I'm going to pull from my back and I'm going to have a bunch of issues. So, also, if I don't have the stability, meaning that I don't have the core stability to do it, and there's a couple of simple tests for that, then once again, we're going to modify this, and that's what's really important. Now, I'm going to start off with, taking my shoes off, and the reason for this is we pretty much want almost everybody to, if you can deadlift barefoot, even no socks, that's the best variation. If you're at a health club or a big box gym, and that might look a little weird. Actually, it won't let you because it's a liability. You'd use something like Vibrams or Vivos, or there's a lot of, you got Nike the 1.0s now that they came with not a lot of support. The reason why is because most regular shoes have an elevated heel. So one, they're going to kind of like tilt you anteriorly, which prevents you from using your backside as much, your posterior chain as much, which we don't want because it's already a tendency. The other thing is, when we use, just bare feet or just socks, we can actually grip the floor, right? We can feel the floor and grip the floor and activate the muscles that we want to use more. So this is a great, number one tip is just to start off, with, like I said, minimalistic footwear or be barefoot or in socks. Now I'm going to start with the regular deadlift, and the reason why, and then we're going to kind of regress. So if you can't do the regular deadlift, here's some variations. Number one thing that I want to explain first, what a deadlift is, because in the setup, one of the first mistakes that get made, right, is we want to be close to the bar, like literally shins close to the bar, because the two mistakes that get made is either too high of a hinge, right, which is like an RDL. So we start here, which is, there's nothing wrong with this if we're doing a Romanian deadlift, right, as an assistance exercise. But if we're doing a deadlift, right, the hips are too high here, and they're far away from the bar. So if the bar is here, my hip is far away from the bar. The second mistake is that we go low into a squat, right? Now, for this, obviously, the hips are pretty far away from the bar too, because the bar is going to be in front of us. So the deadlift is right between the RDL and the squat. So it's right about here, okay? Bam, I got a nice flat back, and from here I pull because I'm engaging both quads, hamstrings, and glutes. So the key is standing close to the bar, right? Because if the bar is far out in front of us when we pull, it does a couple of things, right? It creates a lot of shear stress on our low back versus getting more of it into our hips, okay? So I'm going to get the bar close, grip it, and from here what I like to always teach is like you can see that there's tension in the bar, okay? We're going to pull the tension out of the bar. So I'm driving through my heels, I'm already pulling without getting it off the ground yet, right? And then we're going to drive up, squeeze. Now there's a bunch of different things here that you want to do. Most of the time, you're going to set up at the top, right? So meaning I'm close to the bar. My setup is going to come from taking a deep breath into my belly. Now, for many people, you're actually going to want to get that rib cage down a little bit, right? So I'm an extended person. Most people are extended. So if you deadlift in a really extended position, that's also going to be hard on your low back. So if you look at me from the side, I'd actually exhale first. You can see what happens. It takes me out of that extended position. Now that my rib cage is down, I'm going to take a humongous breath into my belly. Okay? So you saw what I just did there. So now I'm set up, right? So I wanted to show it to you from the side, but I'm going to do it again. So if I'm extended, I'm going to exhale and hold it there, and then take a deep breath into my belly. Then I would go down, right? Get the tension out of the bar. I'd like to take another breath through my nose. Pop through, drive through the heels, squeeze my butt as hard as I can and get tall. So I'm not leaning back, I'm getting tall. Driving it back down. Okay? So those are very, very important because we're getting the right things to work. Right? Because, like I said, just as bad to be in a flex position, it's also bad to be in an overly extended position. Okay? Another thing is the position of the neck. So you'll see many a times when we set up the deadlift, people will crank back, okay? They'll crank their neck back and go this way, okay? So my analogy is keep the neck packed, and what I like to do is this is a good coaching cue, is to eat your shirt. The reason why is if I try to extend back, I literally will rip my shirt or it won't allow me, okay? Because you never want to finish, okay? That shuts down the activation in your hamstrings. So we want to keep that neck nice and neutral because it aligns our spine and allows us to create as much force as we can, keep our abs nice and tight with that, okay? Now, if you're more of an advanced lifter or you've been doing it for some time, I like the dip, grip, and rip. And I got this from Eric Cressy. Dip, grip, and rip means I'm going to set up here at the top, right? So I didn't spend a lot of time at the bottom because we want to take advantage of the stretch shortening cycle, meaning, right, I'm going down, I'm getting some elasticity there, I'm popping through. Now, for somebody that's a beginner, we may spend some time down here and say, hey, I want you to ramp up 3, 4, 5 seconds through your heels and drive through your hamstrings. Try to break the bar over your shins, right? That's going to activate your lats. So I'm breaking. You can see how I'm opening up that chest. You can see the chest breaking over my shins. Now I'm going to drive for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now drive. Squeeze. What that's going to do is you're really going to get the activation up the hamstrings into the glutes to feel the right things versus, having the weight on the front toes and kind of pulling through there. Okay, so we don't want that. We want to make sure with beginners that don't know what they're feeling to get the activation and really go like, okay, now I see what should be working. Okay. The other thing is if we go from the side, and I'm going to roll the bar even though we're on a platform so you can kind of see this better. Actually, let's just move it off here. This is lightweight. Is to not come down and squat, right? So you can kind of see how I'm squatting now. The problem with this is because if my knees fall too far forward, if I try to bring the bar up, it's going to bump into my knees, and then I'll have to move the bar away, maybe round to come up, okay? That's going to really stress my low back. So a great analogy is imagining that if there's a wall behind me, I like to say push your butt as far back to the wall as you can. So I'm pushing it back, sitting into it. Or a kinesthetic one, what I'll do with my athletes sometimes is literally grab, obviously here you want to be careful with this, but it's like give them a raking cue. So right? Grab them by the pants, because that way, or imagine that there's a string right there on the low back that pulls them back, okay? Because that way, you know, if there's a string, it doesn't pull you down, it pulls you back. So that's a great analogy. So you can kind of see what the athletes or the client reacts better to, or what's better for you, you know, as a cue. But when I push it back, now I have space for that bar to move. Because the thing is, the back is a lot better at handling compression than shear force, right? And that's why we don't want the bar to come out. Puts a lot of stress on that low back, right? And it can create a lot of issues. So those are just some coaching cues. The other thing that we're going to do is also the setup of the hands. Now, the setup of the hands, well, you don't want to go wide on this unless we're doing like snatch grip sumos for certain, you know, snatch grip deadlifts for a certain reason. But I'm going to have my hands close to my knees. Now, the reason why is because I actually want to rip my knees out a little bit into my hands to create that tension, right? Now I'm going to bend the bar over my back, drive through, get nice and tall, right? Also at the bottom, you don't want to round those shoulders, right? I want to open them up, which is why I try to bend the bar over the shins, okay? What you're going to see is if you start deadlifting heavy, that sometimes the upper back will round. Now, you're okay there as long as the low back is nice and tight. You'll see some of the top deadlifters in the world, they're pulling heavy weight, their thoracic spine bends, right? While the low back is okay and they come up and finish here. Now, the upper back, like buttresses that kind of force, and that's why you see the top deadlifters have really big upper backs. What you want to be careful of, if you see people that have very muscular low backs, it means they're moving through there, and that's dangerous because it can lead to a lot of injury, okay? Now, if someone cannot do the regular deadlift, okay, I love the trap bar variation the most, but first I'm going to show the sumo variation because we're on a regular bar right now. So sumo, we just go wider. How wide do we go? Depends. I have pretty long femurs, I might go a little wider. The shorter you are, or should I say, the shorter your legs are, the closer you'd go. And the longer your legs are, the wider you'd go. I like to be right around where the knurling, well, depending on when the knurling starts, but where these lines are. You don't want to go too wide, right? If I go too wide, I can't create torque. So I'm going so wide that I can still create force. I'm going to bring my arms not really close. I want to bring them out to the knee so I can do the same thing as I did with the regular bar, right? So I can still push those hands out, open up my chest. Now, you know, the tendency for some people on the sumo is to squat down, okay? We don't want that because we don't want those knees to fall forward and then the path of the bar gets stuck again. So the butt's still going to get pulled back like we would with that string, okay? We're still going to open up the chest, pull back. The breath, we do the same as I just demonstrated earlier. Neck is nice and packed. Drive through. And we're nice and tall, right? Looking forward. On the way down, you know, same thing. A lot of times you'll see people going the way down and try to squat it down with the knees getting away. Move the hips out of the way and deload it and put it back down. So the sumo is very similar. It just allows us to be, first of all, get more stability. We can be a little more upright than we do in a regular deadlift. And once again, that saves, you know, it creates more compressive forces and less shear force, which for someone with a back injury or back issues is a little safer. Like, so for me, I stay within sumo and trap bar because I had a bad back injury, which is good now, but it's still better for me, okay? One thing about sumo deadlifts that you want to be careful about, if you constantly do them, so if you're doing 8, 12 weeks of sumo deadlifts, it can really beat up your hips. So I tend to go, you know, if we're doing a 4-week cycle of sumo deadlifts, then we'll switch it up. Maybe go with rack pulls, trap bar deadlifts, you know, kettlebell deadlifts, whatever it is, that progression that you want. But that's the only thing that I kind of really want to, you know, talk about there. And remember, don't go too wide because then you cannot rip the floor apart and create that force. Now, before we move on to the trap bar real quick, I'm just going to say these options are available to you. So can you do the regular deadlift and you don't have great mobility? Okay, put it on two like high plates or on boxes, and now you can pull from just right below the knees, and you're safe there. Okay, you can do a rack pull, just like basically knee height, just drive that hinge pattern. Okay, so there's a lot of modifications that you can do here to be able to do the hinge and still get results from it without, kind of like just sacrificing this great exercise, but not going, it's kind of like very black and white. Well, pull off the floor or don't do it at all. One of our favorites here is definitely the trap bar deadlift. I'm going to roll this bar out here. Ooh, nice and squeaky. So, maybe some gyms don't have the trap bar, which is kind of sad. That deserves like a backhand slap, like the one that Batman does in that cartoon. But hopefully you are somewhere where you do have this. So, with the trap bar, a lot of it is going to stay much the same. Why is this so great? Watch, I step into the bar, and so the weight is on the side of me, or you can even drive it a little behind rather than in front. And that's a lot safer because, once again, more compressive force, less shear force, and we can kind of drive those knees a little forward that we couldn't before, right? So it puts the weight kind of like right under us. The other thing is the trap bar has two adjustments, so I can go higher on the trap bar or I can go lower. Right now I'm just going to show, lower just means I have more mobility, I get more range of motion. I'm going to show the higher one right now because it is something that most people will be able to do. So on the higher trap bar deadlift, what we're doing, same technique, same cues, I would say. Once again, one of the mistakes is people standing wide. You want to go about shoulder width apart because now, once again, I can rip those knees like I'm ripping toilet paper on the ground to activate my glutes, right? I'm still going to get, you can see there's tension in the bar. I'm going to get the tension out of the bar, driving up. A lot less stress. One thing that you can do here is you can drive those knees a little more forward, right? But you want to be careful of people starting to squat because it's very easy to start squatting, right? So we still want to teach the hinge here and not let those knees fly too far forward. So if you look at me from the side, right, I'm still nice and flat, but you want to avoid this. It's not that it's wrong, but if we're teaching the deadlift, then that's something you want to pay attention to. Other thing, same thing, we're going to push the knees out. Right? Anytime we can create points of contact, create tension, it's a great teaching tool. Okay, so I love the trap bar deadlift for that. You do want to kind of pay attention to the athlete, making sure that those hips are still getting pulled back, and that way you are loading up the backside, the posterior chain. You still want to make sure, what I like to do here is kind of crank out. I like to say open up the clavicles because that way we're doing the same thing as if we were bending the bar over our shins, but because we don't have that cue, right, we kind of rip it open. Same, another thing to mention here is that the athletes will let the bar glide in front of them. So they'll pick it up because it's a lot easier to not pay attention to that and have the weight be in front of you. So I like to slide it back so the hands should be in line with our legs, sometimes even a little bit behind, just to load up the hamstrings and glutes so you can really feel it. Okay, so love the trap bar deadlift. Pretty much almost anyone can use it. All right, so another great tool, this is kind of, we start here a lot of times with many people, is, and it's a regression, is the kettlebell deadlift. And we'd go single kettlebell, double kettlebell deadlift. The great thing about the kettlebell is that, I can actually walk myself further up, and the bell is not behind me, but right in between my ankles. So now I have to reach back. It's this automatic cue, right, to get my hips back. Obviously, people can round to get there, but we're coaching them through that. So it's like the hips go back. We're going to break the kettlebell apart, and you can see how I'm opening up my clavicles here, okay? Very much same cues. Chin is packed. We can eat that shirt, drive up, nice and tall, not let our shoulders round, and same path back. Same with the kettlebell. We want to kind of avoid overextending, right? And on this, we teach a lot of the hissing out. So as you deadlift. Now, every time I exhale fully, it creates tension in my rib cage, in my abs, bringing my rib cage down, and it prevents me from leaning back. It's pretty much almost impossible to go into extension when you're breathing out. Right? So just another coaching cue. Now, like I said, there's more. If we're just reteaching the hinge completely, a technique is to attach a band onto a squat rack. So imagine having the band run through your legs and we're grabbing it here, ripping the band apart, and then just driving the hinge coming up, feeling that tension, letting the band pull you back so that the person can feel hamstrings, glutes, that neutral spine. And I wish I had like a stick. We have the sticks and the rods where we teach the planks. So imagine at the bottom, if I put a stick, it should be touching my low back, have a little bit of curve, touching my upper back, and then the top of my neck. Right? So from there, when we deadlift up, that stick should stay in place. So essentially, actually, Jim is being a ninja right now, and he's getting it for me. So watch when I reach for this, it just comes out of nowhere, magician style. Right? So when we're doing the hinge, if we're upright here, right, I'm feeling it touch my butt. There shouldn't be too much of a gap, so I'm going to breathe out, get nice and tall, and now you can see this is a great teaching tool for people because they can feel it. Is it disconnecting from basically my tailbone, my upper back? Is my neck forward and I'm not feeling it? Driving tall. Right? So great teaching tool because essentially in a deadlift, think about this. If we're in a plank position on the ground, that's why the plank is a great tool. Is we're just deadlifting, keeping that. Now we're in the plank. So this is our plank. We're nice and tall. We're solid. We're not hyperextended, right? We're not collapsed. We're nice and tall. So there are more foundational, like as I talked about, the assessment of do you have stability and mobility. These would be the things that we're assessing. Can you get to the ground safely with a neutral spine at all? Can you hold stable positions? Is your core strong enough to even see, which one of these would be the right fit, and then we build on top of it. Because many people say, well, the deadlift hurts me, it's not right for me. But, you may be picking up groceries, picking up your kids, or, you're going to go down and tie your shoelaces. You're deadlifting. You're hinging. So you're doing it in your everyday life. To say that it's dangerous, it's kind of crazy because you're doing it. Unless you're seriously injured, and like I said, you need therapy and you need to see a doctor or a specialist for that. For the vast majority of people, you can hinge safely, deadlift safely with a regression, with coaching cues, and then you want to build up that mobility and stability and then get it stronger, right? So if I'm structurally intact, if I have my joints in the right places and I have good posture and alignment, then I want to strengthen that and create resilience there. Not only strength, but resilience, and that's going to, not only improve my performance, whether I'm an athlete or whether you want to get stronger, faster, because this is one of the best exercises. It's also going to improve, like I said, fat loss. It's also going to improve just longevity in the way that you feel. But if we load dysfunction, right? So if I'm loading this deadlift up and I'm rounded and I'm going down here and my hips are shifting and I'm lifting, I'm loading dysfunction. And when you load dysfunction, you're just going to break the tissues down faster. You're going to reach a threshold and something's going to go wrong. And I would have you consider that most likely the injury that you have is because of a result of that. Okay? So I hope that this really helped you out. Pick and choose and get coaching cues to improve your deadlift and maybe see that you need to take a step back to take 2 or 3 steps forward. And in that case, I always say, taking a step back is really not necessarily taking a step back. A regression is not a step back. A regression sometimes is a step forward because you'll do it right, you'll be able to load it, you'll be able to progress. But if you're using a progression with a faulty movement pattern mechanics, you're going to load dysfunction and things are going to go wrong. So there you go, teaching the deadlift. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions. If you have a question that you want to follow up with, put it in the comment section, and I will answer it the best I can, or maybe even do a follow-up video. So, Coach Luka's out, Vigor Fitness and Performance. See you next time.